Okay, so, how many of you, I hate this word, I really hate it. We're working on trying to find another thing to call it, but right now the standard term is inner healing. How many of you have heard inner healing, the term inner healing? Okay. How many of you have actually received what we would call inner healing? Oh my gosh, so see, this is exciting. Okay, how many of you felt like it was a significant life-transforming moment for you? And so I would love to just have a bunch of testimonies for y'all to be able to share and for us to put on, because inner healing, I think a lot of people have a really negative connotation, because in order to receive inner healing, that means you must like either be ill or broken or something, you know? And very few people really want to volunteer for that program. So what I would love to transition it and start calling to is just heart ministry, because my heart is to, after just spending time with the Lord and understanding how available and how accessible He is in the things that my whole entire life, I thought was just standard, was normal. The fear, the anxiety, the darkness, the depression, you know, the hopelessness, the emptiness, the loneliness, the helplessness, powerlessness, fear, anger. I just thought those were standard things that we just had to learn how to white knuckle our way through, you know, or apply a few scriptures to it. Greater is He who is in me than who is in the world. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, you know. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Put your past behind you. Well, the problem is it keeps following you, and it keeps showing up. And we don't realize how many unresolved things we have inside of us until we get in deeply committed relationships. And it's amazing how quickly they start to surface. And it's always our spouse's fault. And so, that's right, yeah. So, how many of you are familiar with the psychology term or counseling term or whatever, the iceberg theory? Okay, so that the iceberg, we think that the way that we're responding, and we think that the way that we're interacting with one another, and we think the way that we're showing up, and the choices we're making, and the decisions we're making, we think it's because we're thinking. But you're really not. Because the whole iceberg, 90% of what you're responding from is under the water. It's the subconscious. You have no idea it's an operation. You're only really operating from the top. You only have conscious memory, conscious awareness of about the top 10 of 100% iceberg. And so when you realize that, oh, maybe there's a little bit more going on inside of me than what I'm aware of, because the way that I respond, the way that I react, I either learned it in my family of origin, and nobody who's raised even in the most incredibly dysfunctional family unit, as an adult, you'll start to talk to them and they don't realize that was dysfunction. That was just normal, because that was their family. They didn't have anything to compare it to. They didn't realize that maybe not was healthy, you know? And because if as children, we were ever to allow ourselves to believe that the crazy that's going on in my family right now really has to do more with mom and dad than it does with me, can you imagine how terrifying that would be to be 3 and 4 and 5 years old and to think the people in your life who were here to protect you, to provide for you, to cover you, to look out for you, didn't know what they were doing and they weren't doing a very good job of it. Does that make sense? We never blame our parents. We always, you know, try to figure out how to navigate our way through some really scary, you know, challenging situations. But then you also have kids that are raised in this beautiful family, you know, positive parents, powerfully healthy parents that were just really pouring into you, giving you everything that you needed. But the enemy actually hates you. I don't know if y'all have caught on to that yet, but he really doesn't like you. And he really is out to destroy us. And he really does prowl around like a lion looking for someone to devour. And he goes for the weakest. And he goes for the most opportune moments. And we are most vulnerable when we're children, because we're looking to the adults and the caregivers in our lives to help us navigate what is good, what is bad, what is scary, what is true, and what's a lie. But back to our parents, they're not perfect people either. You know what I mean? And they only have to bring into this family dynamic what they were given. And so a lot of times your parents don't even know to be looking out for that look on your face that says, you know, I'm terrified right now. This is really scaring me. They just, you know, quite often will kind of like, you know, toughen up, come on, you know, let's go, let's move. They're not in tune because they're so busy with the things that are going on in their own lives. And so the enemy in that moment is right there in that tiny little window, looking for an opportunity to slip in, literally kind of sit on your shoulder and slip that little thing in there when you see that look in your dad's eye, for example, when he comes in at the dinner table and sits down. He could have had a really bad day. He could have just had a really horrible, you know, telephone call. But he walks in, he's got a look in his eye, you glance at him, and in that moment, the enemy's right there and going, see, he really just didn't think that you're enough. He's really mad at you. He doesn't really like you very much. The problem with those kinds of lies, they feel very true. It feels so true at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 years old. You don't know to even question it. It's just kind of like, oh, okay. And so you take that in, and the enemy doesn't need you to agree with him in order for him to be empowered. He simply needs you to not disagree with him. Your silence is agreement. And when that thing sets into your heart and you begin to have this realization, or you think it's your realization, Dad really didn't think I'm enough. I'm not measuring up. That thing gets embedded in there. And it's literally like, have you ever seen how like they, I'm maybe giving my age away. I don't know what a zoo looks like these days. I haven't visited the elephant department in a while. I think they actually get to swim in water now and spray and things. But back in the day when I was going to the zoo, they were chained by one leg, this concrete anchor. And they would sit there and they would eat hay and they would rock back and forth, but they were chained. And they learned early on, don't challenge the chain. So by the time you get to be a grown adult elephant, you don't challenge the chain. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so the very same thing is happening, I guarantee you, in each and every one of you. And I just want to help you understand that when you are not operating in any given circumstance or situation from the perfect peace of Christ, you are operating from a lie. Mm-hmm. And how do you know it's a lie? Because it doesn't feel peaceful. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel good. Well, of course, I would be in a panic right now. I just went to my job this morning, and instead of a paycheck, I got my walking papers. My house payment is due tomorrow. I have 3 children to feed, and I don't have a savings account. Of course, I would be in a panic right now. Except if it wasn't true that you could be at peace in all circumstances, do you think he would say, be at peace in all circumstances? Do you think Jesus was ever in a frantic panic? Yeah. I think he was really sad. Yeah. I think he was really hurting. I think he was really disappointed with a lot of things that he saw, but I don't think he was ever operating from, oh no, what am I gonna do? And so I want you to also understand that you're constantly operating from 2 belief systems. You have what you know to be true. How many of you believe that the Bible is true? Okay. So how many of you have ever had a moment where things didn't go so good at work and you're really not sure, or you lost your job? I mean, there's been plenty of opportunities for that in 2020, right? If ever was a year to expose kind of what's going on inside, we've had a really great opportunity. But then you have an experiential belief that speaks louder than what you know in your head. Have you ever found that little dynamic going on inside of you? Part of me believes this, but part of me is experiencing this, part of me wants to do this, part of me doesn't want to do that. I know in my head, he says, and I believe that he's faithful and he's true and he's just and he's going to come through in every moment for me, until I'm in a crisis. And then if anything less than the perfect peace of Christ is rising up inside of you, your true belief system has just been exposed. And so the difference between head knowledge and experiential knowledge is experiential knowledge is going to win every time. And experiential knowledge comes from those earlier things that we're talking about when it felt really true that I'm alone, I'm rejected, I'm abandoned because my dad left when I was 2. Or, do you know what I'm saying? Or there was a horrific, abusive situation that happened. He wasn't really with me. I'm not really protected, I'm on my own. I'm not safe. I've been violated. I'm ruined. I'm broken. I'm dirty. I'll never be good for anybody again. So all those beliefs can be going on inside, and that truth is going to show up and is going to be the thing that you iceberg effect, because it's on your subconscious, react from when you're in any other circumstance or situation that's even remotely familiar to that experience. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so that's what I've got 15 minutes. Somebody better watch me, because once you give me this platform and you start talking about inner healing, y'all may miss your small groups tonight. So watch me on the clock. So all I want to do is just kind of introduce you to that concept and let you understand how real the things that are going on inside of you really are. And first of all, we really haven't been very well equipped or trained in how to navigate through pain. We are created for survival, so we instinctively find a way to medicate, run, hide, stuff, close off the bad feelings, right? And so what I'm gonna give you this little thing today is to kind of just help you understand that concept that's going on. So much of what's happening in you really has nothing to do with what's happening in this relationship or in that conversation or that fight that you just got through having. What's really going on is something that's coming typically from a much deeper place. And so Jesus would love to meet you in that place. And I'm telling you guys, he is sitting on the edge of his seat just waiting. Would you please just come? Would you please just move into that and experience it with me? Will you just go to that place, whatever this thing that's coming up, it is an invitation. How many of you think that negative emotions are bad? Like shame, guilt, fear, disappointment? Okay. Well, they don't feel good, but they're not bad. Is E bad on your gas tank? I would rather know I'm on empty than find out I'm on empty, right? So E is neither good nor bad. It's simply an indicator. Yeah. And that's the same thing about your emotions. They may feel really bad, but they're actually indicators there's something going on down below the water in that subconscious place that the Lord is wanting access to. And so, with that being said, I'm giving you some homework. So, again, like I said, half of what's going on inside of us is most easily exposed by the one that we're living with, or are seriously dating and considering marriage and getting married too. These deep relationships, these close relationships, are the ones that really expose what's going on inside. So, this is just a quick little exercise for y'all to have on hand when you get into one of those disagreements, okay? When the thing comes up, starting to happen between the two of you, how many of you know when this is, okay, it's just taking a left turn and it's all downhill from here because we've got enough history, we know where this is going? How many of you know that? Okay. When you recognize this is in that category, this is what I want one of you to have the sense enough to do. Whoever recognizes this thing is going the wrong way quick is the one that needs to call time out. Literally, time out, time out, time out, time out. Time out means everybody honors it. If somebody calls it, the other one needs to honor it. Don't continue to badger. Don't continue to follow them around. Don't chase them to the bathroom. Don't pound on the door. Don't insist on resolving it right now. If somebody has the presence of mind and cares enough about this relationship to say time out, then honor time out. When you designate a time out, what you need to do is decide just how much time is this going to take? Do I need 15 minutes? Do I need to walk around the block? Or do we need to revisit this at dinner tomorrow night? Give me lots of time to calm down. And sometimes we may need to revisit this in 2 or 3 days, but that's okay. You've designated a time when you're going to come back together. You are going to complete the thing that that needs to be completed. But it's so much better if we could come back to finish this thing from the perspective of what was really going on. Does that make sense? Instead of what feels like this is all about right now. Because I can assure you, what it feels like it's about right now really has nothing to do with what it's about right now. Amen. This is just a very familiar dynamic that you have history and an experience with that didn't go well for you. And it's unresolved pain, and that part of you is literally trapped in time and in pain and is in desperate need of an encounter with Jesus, because I think probably everyone in this room has enough truth and has enough Bible knowledge to be able to know better than what they're experiencing. But back to which experience, which knowledge is going to trump? Head knowledge or experiential knowledge? Experiential knowledge. Where's experiential knowledge stored? In the 90% under the water. The unexplored parts that you're not even aware of that are in operation. So, but this is a handy little tool to help you identify what is going on inside of me. So, when somebody calls the timeout, we're going to honor the timeout, designate a time when we're going to come back and try to revisit this. And it's not just timeout for the sake of cooling down or circling the block and reinforcing my argument. You know, we're not going to just continue to rewrite the script. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our corners, our safe place, our quiet place. And then what I want to encourage you to do is to sit down in whatever it is that's going on inside of you in that moment. And this is very helpful for people that aren't very connected to or aware of their emotions, because it gives you all kinds of emotion words, and it even gives you definition. And so even if you don't recognize the word, read the definition, and it's amazing. It's like, oh, that's exactly what I'm feeling, okay? So what I want you to do, this is I think a three-parter. It starts on page 22. So what I want you to do is identify, as a result of this dynamic that was going on, what was I feeling? What are the emotions I'm experiencing because of what just transpired? And I want you to circle all that apply, which it'll be great emotional inventory for you. You may learn a thing or two as you read some of these definitions. You may have a new word at the end of the day that you can put in your box. But I want you to check all that apply, but then circle like the top three. Okay? And then number 3 on page 24, when you feel that way, what do you do? When I feel a certain way, I have a certain reaction. So what do you do? Do you act out? Do you get angry? Do you avoid? Do you belittle? Okay? So go through the list and take an honest inventory about what I do. And there's lots of options. That takes us all the way to page 28. And on page 28 then, again, circle all that apply, but pick the top 3. And step number 4 is about what were you really wanting to experience in your marriage? What were you really wanting to experience in that conversation you were trying to have that didn't work so well and went the wrong direction? Okay? And then, after you've done your inventory, you figured out what was I feeling, what do I do, and what was I wanting, you can transfer it to this other sheet. Put the top 3. This is my fear, or my feelings. This is what I was feeling, which is really, all of these are based on fear. And then what do I do? And then what was I really wanting? Okay, so but the real part of this exercise is when you identify what you were feeling, what are the emotions that were being tapped into and surfacing in that little encounter. When you're sitting in your quiet space, I want you to go in there and feel that. How many of you enjoy just sitting down and moving in there and feeling that pain?
Hate it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why we don't do it. And that's why we're still circling the mountain. And that's why we still are finding ourselves in the same place. It's not getting any resolved because we're not moving into it and identifying what's going on. And so I just keep thinking about these negative emotions as the things that are just constantly chasing us. Like when they show up, like what do? We don't want to stop. We don't want to turn around and face it and move into it and go, wow, what is the belief in this emotion that is driving the pain. And so, but if you would learn how to do that, if you're feeling defected, if you're feeling disappointed, if you're feeling disrespected, just sit in that for a minute. Because the way that God has designed you, He has designed your mind to continue to recycle unresolved experiences, unresolved beliefs, unresolved circumstances and situations. And so your brain is immediate, it's already designed. If you will just sit in a moment and feel what it feels like to be a failure, I promise you, you won't be sitting in that feeling very long before you are instinctively taken back to an earlier time, an earlier place where that is a familiar feeling. And when you move into that feeling, what you do then is you find out, and it can be, I don't want to go through the deep stuff. I don't want to go in this too long because I probably am already over time. But let's just work on this one. So if I'm feeling like a failure and I feel that, it's like, okay, all of a sudden I remember I'm 5 years old and Dad asked me to do something and I couldn't decide which was a hammer and which was a pair of pliers. And his reaction was such that I have totally failed. Like there's just something innately wrong with me. I've so disappointed my dad. Okay. So if you're in that memory, then I want you to sit in the memory for just a minute and try to literally move into the memory and to connect with a little 5-year-old that's in that place. Don't just remember the memory. There's a difference in looking at it and moving into it. Because once you get into it, it's amazing how quickly you can remember those red patent shoes that I wore until my mother said, enjoy them because tomorrow I'm gonna have to put them in the trash because there are no toes left. And so I slept with them under my pillow so my mother couldn't find them. But I mean, when you get back into that memory, it's amazing how alive those details come. And so again, back to the power of what's going on in your subconscious. So when you get in there, that's the one that needs the truth. That's the one that needs the experience from Jesus, to have Him come in and speak to whatever the failure is. The helplessness, the hopelessness, the abandoned, the rejected, nobody wants me, no, I'm not lovable, whatever it is. The enemy doesn't need a lot of lies, he just needs one. It only takes one that can disable you your whole entire life, because you will continue to bump into circumstances and situations that are remotely familiar to whatever that one lie is, and it's all it takes to shut you down. The next thing you know, you're 3 years old again, and there you are, doing 3-year-old things again, responding the same way you did as a young one. So he doesn't need a lot of lies, he just needs 1 or 2 that work. So what I want to encourage you to do is to turn around, face your pain, move into it, sit there in a moment, just long enough to identify, why does this hurt so bad? Where have I felt this before? And allow your mind to do what God has created it to do. Immediately connect you back to an earlier time, an earlier place where this pain is unresolved. And then what you do in that place is you just sit there and you just allow Jesus to come in and to meet the 3-year-old, the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old, whoever this is that is in excruciating pain, feeling helpless, abandoned, rejected, whatever, and wait for Him to come into that place. And only He knows what you need. Sometimes you need a word, sometimes you need a hug, sometimes you just need all the pain to just dissolve and disappear and go away, and nobody but Jesus can do that. But He can and He will, because He wants your freedom more than you do, because He paid a really high price for you to have access to this kind of power and this type of freedom. So when you do that little homework assignment and you've identified what you were feeling and where it's coming from and what Jesus told you about that, then when you come back at the end of timeout and you start to pick up where you left off, I want you to start with what you just learned about you, because it will be a completely different conversation when you revisit this from this place of, okay, that whole thing, this is what was really going on inside of me. And if both of you do that, and you come back and you start with what was happening in my circle, I think is re-engaged terminology, manage your own circle. It's amazing what a difference that's gonna make. It's so simple. And I've been doing this, 13 years, a very long time. I know all the rules, I know all the tools, but, and for the most part, I'm not triggered every day, but it's surprising you know, all of a sudden I was fond, there's always something, you know, which I love because the Lord's just really wanting us to heal us completely up. There was a little scenario just last week, I think. We have two separate little places where we live back and forth. And so I've been loaning this place out to my really close friends. You know, it's like, good, go, enjoy. It's beautiful up there, you know, whatever. And so Steve notified me that he was wanting to know if the house was open so that we could loan it out to some of his friends. And I cannot tell you what was going on inside of me. And I was wrestling with myself so desperately. I was like, this is so hypocritical. What in the world is wrong with me? I mean, like, I knew there was something, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I thought, okay, all right, I'm just gonna be honest, and I'm gonna tell him, I know this is hypocritical. I know this is wrong. I don't need you to fix it. I promise to work on it, but I just wanna let you know, this is what's happening inside of me. I said, the reaction that comes up inside of me when I think about your friends, men that I don't know closely, you know, in my house, in my bedroom, in my bathroom, in my most intimate places, I can't even tell you the anxiety and what it brings up inside of me. And so Steve, not knowing these tools quite as well as I do, didn't pay any attention to what I said in the setup. He immediately went to his triggered place and he's like, oh, like I know whoever, the last one of my really close friends, you know, family that I let stay in this. Oh, just like we're so close. And I just looked at him and I shut completely down. I felt myself going away and I couldn't catch me. I mean, I was gone. It literally took, it's an improvement. It didn't take 3 days. I think by the next day, and that was on an evening, by the time I was coming home the next day, I texted him and worked through it. But what I realized in that time, what was really going on inside of me, it immediately took me back to that sense of being violated by a neighbor at 5. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that make sense? Mm-hmm. But it, you know, I mean, you're not thinking about that, you know, like this is a house. What is the big deal, you know? Yeah. And so that was the first way. That's what I was experiencing initially. But then when I thought I had set things up really safely, because I know Steve's the D and I know I'm an S, because Dawn, you know, wrote on, I literally pulled out her homework and I'm like, okay, how do I communicate this to a D? You know, I wanted to do it right. You know, he still, you know, he got a little bit triggered. And so then I was like, oh my gosh, that's a whole nother wave. It's like trauma on top of trauma, because now the one that I thought was my safe place that I could really open up and be honest with, it didn't turn out so safe, you know, which takes me back to all those situations with my dad, the very one who's supposed to protect me and defend me and fight for me and cuddle me and honor me and lift me up and make me feel like a princess, is the one that I was probably more terrified of than anybody, you know. So you never know if it's safe or if it's not, you know. You think you've got your ground, you got your footing, until suddenly you don't, you know. And so, but then it was great because I went to my corner, I sat in my stuff, I figured out where it was coming from, why it hurt so bad, and then I was able to come back and sit down with him and have a rational, not emotional conversation. Does that make sense? So instead of me going back and trying to revisit the place that, you know, I left, we were able to go back and go, okay, I gotta tell you, this is what I found out about me. This is what was going on inside of me. And once he was able to hear that, then he was able to go, oh, yeah, I guess this is what was going on inside of me. And he didn't even have to go to the corner, you know? He was able to figure it out just that quickly, you know? So anyway, this really is an invaluable tool. I hope you guys will put it in your pocket. I hope you'll use it. I hope you'll understand the principle about the power of the unseen. What's going on in the subconscious place is what you're actually living from. And when we are living from our wounds, oh, it gets really messy, you know? A lot of blood, a lot of splatter, a lot of like nasty. And so I just want to encourage you guys to understand the significance of the power of your emotions. They're not bad, they're indicators, you know? So I love you, I bless you, and go to class.